The day I heard my secretary sing, I was only seconds away from making the worst decision of my life. I had spent years believing that success meant knowing when to walk away from people, when to close a door, and when to protect yourself before anyone had the chance to disappoint you. But that afternoon, inside a small family restaurant where sunlight poured through tall windows and turned the dusty air golden, a woman I had known professionally for nearly 4 years looked at me with tears in her eyes, picked up a microphone, and sang a line that made my entire world stop: "Take me home with you." It sounded romantic at first, but the truth behind those words was nothing like what anyone in that room imagined. Before we go any further, if you believe that kindness can change a person's life, that forgiveness can heal wounds we cannot see, and that everyone deserves hope and a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who may need it, and subscribe to our channel. Sometimes the people sitting quietly beside us are carrying battles we know nothing about. My name is Everett, and at 48, I had become very good at building walls. I owned a successful architectural firm in Hartford, Connecticut, and from the outside my life looked almost embarrassingly perfect. I had a beautiful office, a comfortable home, employees who respected me, and enough money to never worry about ordinary expenses. Yet there was one thing my success had never been able to buy back: the warmth of the family I had lost. My younger brother, Wesley, had died 12 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving behind his wife and their little daughter, Marin. I had promised Wesley that I would always look after them, but grief made me clumsy, and guilt made me distant. I sent checks when I should have sent flowers. I offered practical solutions when I should have offered my presence. Eventually, Marin grew up believing that her uncle cared more about his business than about her, and I allowed that misunderstanding to become the truth between us. My secretary, Clara knew more about my failures than almost anyone because she had worked beside me long enough to see the man beneath the expensive suit. Clara was 36, quietly intelligent, remarkably organized, and almost impossible to impress. She had a way of remembering details that everyone else overlooked. She knew which clients preferred morning meetings, which employees were caring for sick parents, which invoices were likely to cause problems, and which days I needed someone to remind me to eat lunch. She never complained about her workload, but she also never allowed me to treat her like a machine. If I became rude because of stress, she would calmly put a folder on my desk and remind me that being successful did not give me permission to become cruel. At first, I found her honesty irritating. Later, I began to depend on it. Over the years, I learned that Clara had a gentle heart hidden beneath her practical exterior. She volunteered at a community center every Saturday, quietly paid for groceries for elderly neighbors, and kept a collection of handwritten birthday cards for people who had no family nearby. She never talked about those things. I discovered them accidentally. That afternoon had begun badly. A major project my company had spent 8 months developing had collapsed because a partner firm withdrew at the last moment. I had spent the entire morning signing cancellation documents and blaming myself for trusting the wrong people. By 3 o'clock, I was exhausted and angry. Clara walked into my office carrying a cup of coffee and told me that I was finished for the day. I told her I still had work to do. She simply looked at me and said that if I continued working, would eventually mistake punishment for productivity. Then she reminded me that it was a Friday and suggested we stop by a small restaurant downtown where some of our employees occasionally gathered for lunch. I almost refused, but something in her expression made me hesitate. She wasn't asking as my secretary. She was asking as someone who genuinely wanted me to breathe. The restaurant was bright and peaceful, with large windows facing a busy street and sunlight stretching across wooden tables. A local musician was performing acoustic songs near the corner, and several people were enjoying an early afternoon meal. Clara and I sat near the window, and for the first time in months, I wasn't looking at my phone. We talked about ordinary things. She told me about a childhood dream of becoming a singer. I laughed when she admitted that she once performed in a school talent show and forgot half the lyrics. She laughed too, and for a few minutes, I saw a version of Clara I had never seen at the office. She wasn't my secretary. She was simply a woman enjoying a beautiful afternoon. Then the musician invited people to choose songs. Clara suddenly raised her hand. I assumed she was joking until she stood and walked toward the microphone. She turned back toward me, and there was something uncertain in her face. I smiled, expecting a harmless performance. Instead, she chose a duet and asked me to join her. I shook my head immediately. I told her I couldn't sing. She smiled and said that wasn't the point. The musician began playing softly, and Clara started singing. Her voice was warm, imperfect, and breathtakingly sincere. The restaurant gradually became quiet. She sang about leaving behind the places that had wounded you and finding somewhere you could finally feel safe. Then, during the final part of the song, she looked directly at me and sang the words that would stay in my mind for years, "Take me home with you." A few people smiled because they assumed it was a romantic moment. I felt my face burn. But Clara wasn't smiling. Her eyes were full of tears. When the song ended, she lowered the microphone and walked back to our table. I asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed a folded piece of paper in front of me. It was a letter from Marin. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My niece had written that she was moving away from Connecticut in 3 days. She had been offered a position in another state and intended to leave without saying goodbye because she believed I had made it clear, through years of silence, that I didn't want to be part of her life. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. Clara finally told me that Marin had contacted her 2 weeks earlier because she didn't know how to reach me without feeling rejected. Clara had promised not to interfere unless Marin was in danger, but that morning Marin had admitted that she was leaving for good. Clara knew I would regret allowing another person I loved to disappear without a final attempt. That was why she had brought me to the restaurant. That was why she had sung those words. "Take me home with you" wasn't about herself. It was about Marin, who had spent 12 years believing that she had no home in my heart. I was furious at first. I asked Clara why she had hidden this from me. She calmly told me that she hadn't hidden it to hurt me. She had hidden it because she knew I would react defensively if I believed someone was trying to force me into an emotional conversation. She wanted me to hear the truth before my pride could build another wall. Then she told me something that broke through me completely. She said Marin didn't hate me. She simply stopped expecting anything from me, and there was a difference between hatred and giving up. I drove to Marin's apartment that afternoon. Not because Clara told me to, but because for the first time in 12 years, I understood that waiting for the perfect moment was another form of cowardice. Marin opened the door and looked surprised to see me. She had grown into a confident young woman with the same gray eyes her father had possessed. I wanted to explain everything immediately, but I remembered Clara's advice: stop trying to solve feelings like business problems. So I simply apologized. I told Marin that I had loved her all those years, but I had been so consumed by guilt over failing her father that I had convinced myself staying away was somehow respectful. I admitted that I had been wrong. Marin cried. So did I. She told me that as a child she used to wait for me on her birthday because her mother always said Uncle Everett would visit someday. Eventually she stopped waiting. She told me that she didn't need money, gifts, or promises. She had needed someone to show up. I couldn't change those 12 years. Nothing I said could return the birthdays I had missed or the school events I had never attended. But I could finally stop pretending that the past gave me permission to abandon the future. Marin agreed to have lunch with me the next day. Then she asked whether Clara had really made me sing. I laughed for the first time in days and admitted that Clara had chosen the song but had not managed to make me sing a single note. Marin smiled and said that sounded exactly like Clara. That small smile felt like the first crack in a wall I had spent years building. The following weeks changed everything. I began visiting Marin before she moved away, not constantly and not desperately, but consistently. We had coffee, walked through parks, looked through old photographs, and talked about Wesley. I learned things about my brother that I had never known because I had been too busy grieving the version of him I remembered. Marin learned that her uncle was not the cold businessman she had imagined. I learned that she wasn't the distant child I had unconsciously blamed her for becoming. We were two people who had been hurt by the same loss and had spent years standing on opposite sides of the same closed door. Clara never took credit for what happened. When I thanked her, she told me she had simply done what she hoped someone would do for her if she ever became too afraid to ask for help. Later, I discovered why that sentence mattered. Clara had spent years caring for her widowed mother while working full-time, and after her mother passed away, Clara had convinced herself that needing anyone was a weakness. She had built her own walls too. The difference was that she recognized them when she saw them in someone else. On the morning Marin finally left for her new job, I drove her to the train station. She hugged me before leaving and told me that she no longer wanted me to promise that I would always be there. She wanted me to prove it. I told her I would. Then she smiled and said she believed me. Several months later, my company recovered from the failed project. I changed the way I managed people. I stopped measuring loyalty by hours worked and began measuring success by whether the people around me felt respected. Clara eventually became a partner in the firm, not because I gave her the position as a favor, but because she had earned it through years of exceptional work and courage. She still teased me about my terrible singing, and every Friday afternoon, when the workday ended, we would sometimes stop at that same restaurant. One spring afternoon, Clara chose another duet. This time, she didn't sing the words about taking someone home. Instead, she chose a song about returning to the people who matter before life teaches you that some doors don't open twice. When she finished, she looked at me and smiled. I finally understood what she had been trying to tell me that first day. Home was never a building. It was not a perfect family, a successful career, or a place where nothing could hurt you. Home was the courage to return, the humility to apologize, and the willingness to stay when leaving would be easier. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. Have you ever pushed someone away because you were afraid that you had already hurt them too much to return? If this story touched something inside you, leave a meaningful comment and tell us what home means to you, or tell us about the person you believe deserves a second chance. Sometimes a single honest sentence can reach someone who feels completely alone. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes the person who saves us doesn't give us money, advice, or a miracle. Sometimes they simply stand beside us, look past our pride, and remind us that it is not too late to go home.